This is AOS Shorts. Get better fast.
Hi, I'm Dan from AOSshorts.com, your essential guide to all things Warhammer Age of Sigmar. Today I'm here at Vagabond Games in Auckland, New Zealand to talk about everything to do with the new Soul Wars box set and Malign Sorcery. So, over the last 12 hours or so, we've been deluged with information from Games Workshop and all the official review sources about everything that we need to know about Age of Sigmar 2nd edition. You'd see all the coverage on match play from the usual sources such as Facehammer, Heel and Hammer, Mengel Minis and others. They've really broken it down. So what can I add? Well, I want to, in true AOS Shorts style, try and distill what you need to know as a match play gamer. Now, there's a provision on that. In fact, there's two provisions on that. One, we've received so much information from Games Workshop over the last 2 weeks in the lead up to this release that it's impossible to cover it in a short video. So I'd recommend that you go to AOSshorts.com, where I've been compiling all of the changes, all of the information that you need to know, nicely compiled in one page. There's also separate pages for Stormcast, Sacrosanct Chamber, for the Night Haunt, for Malign Sorcery, everything there so you can sit back, you can read it through. I'll also put all my show notes up for this video up on the website as well, so you can refer back to it later. Now, the second proviso is that we don't have General's Handbook 2018 yet. General's Handbook 2018 is also coming out on the same day. It's going to be available for pre-order on the day that you're watching this, Saturday the 16th of June, and going to be coming out on the 30th of June at the end of the month. Now, we don't have that, so that's a major proviso, because in that General's Handbook we've got new battle plans, we've got new points, new rules for match play. So the aim with this show is to really just take you through the key bits and the core rules from the box set, this fabulous new core book that we have got, and the Malign Sorcery rules as to what you're going to be using. So let's start with some overall impressions before I dive in. Look, I've been lucky enough to spend a couple of hours this morning with these books and to go through them. They're absolutely stunning. So starting from a design aesthetic point, they're absolutely top drawer. I don't think I've seen a Warhammer product like this that has been put out by Games Workshop. What does it feel like to me? It feels like this game has really reached maturity. You can see how much the game has come on with 2nd edition in relation to 1st edition. It's a complete new beast in terms of the production values, in terms of the quality of the book, in terms of the artwork, the maps, the depth of the story, how it's all clearly set out in the core rulebook. It's leaps and bounds on from the first version. It's really, really impressive stuff. From a design element, they all tie together. The art is really top drawer, really pulls together. It's a fabulous release. Now, in terms of going through the rules, you would have seen the core rules. So the core rules have now come out. They're available on Games Workshop's ageofsigmar.com. So we've gone from a 4 rules plus large number of FAQs and various other sources of rules to an 18-page rule set available for free for download on ageofsigmar.com, and I believe probably also gamesworkshop.com and in the Age of Sigmar app. So that is everything that you need in terms of just starting and getting the core rules down. So I think my overall impression of reading through those 18 pages was that it was clean. It was really, really clean and professional. So you read through, and you're not, as an Age of Sigmar 1st edition player, you're not getting a jarring effect. It's not massive changes. They've tweaked and modified mechanics, but without fundamentally blowing up the game that we know and love. What they have also done is they've really worked hard to incorporate the FAQ answers into the core rules. So there's a lot more use of standard definitions. There's a lot more what seems to be care for us rule lawyers picking apart the core rules to try and find gaps. So there's been a lot of effort in there to keep the rule set tight, and at least for the moment, before it gets exposed to thousands of gamers trying to pull it apart. It looks like a really clean and advanced rule set. It's really good to see. So one of the things that I want to do in this show is cover what do you need and what sits in each of the different books for a match play gamer. So what do you need to know if you want to pick it up? What do you need to know for your pre-orders? So let's start with the core book. So the core book comes in two ways. It comes either in the Soul Wars box set or comes separate for available purchase, and I think they've also got a digital version as well. So 200 pages of lore, narrative and background at the beginning, and then 100 pages of rules. So as we all know, those rules are broken down into the three formats of the game: open play, narrative play and match play. Now, I'm not going to spend much time on open play and narrative play in this video. Highly recommend you go and check out the usual sources for coverage of narrative play, Mortal Realms podcast and YouTube channel, and the Garage Hammer podcast. Those guys will do it really good justice. Also probably Mitzi and Jimbo over at the Mitzi and Jimbo show once they get hold of a copy. Now, what else is in the core book? There's the 18 pages core rules that are printed there. There is also a separate hard copy in the starter set if you just want that. And as I said, it's available free online. As well as the match play rules. Match play rules are much, much shorter now, largely because most of the things that were in match play have now been folded into the core rules. There's a couple of other things to touch on that are in the core book set. One is battle strategies. This is a way of adding additional objectives into match play battle plans. So I can see this being used by tournament organisers who want a bit more granularity than a major or a minor win. These objectives give you a way to add in additional victory points or to add scales. So haven't really had much of a chance to play around with that or to see it, but that looks like a neat feature that I haven't seen mentioned much elsewhere. Also in the core book is the Conquest Unbound section at the end. So that does three things. That covers allegiance abilities for each of the 4 Grand Alliances. So those have now been reprinted and tweaked for the 2nd edition. We've got Realms of Battle rules for each of the 7 realms, or for 7 of the realms. So we've got Akshi, Shaman, Gur, Gairan, Haish, Shaish and Olgu all get their standard Realm of Battle rules. I'm really going to be spending some time on realm rules later. There's also the rules for endless spells. It's not the War Scroll cards, it's not the individual unit rules for the endless spells themselves, but it's the rules for the mechanics of how they work. Now, that's the core book and what's in there. So in terms of Malign Sorcery, the 2nd book that comes in this box set along with the 13 endless spell push fit models. So what do we have in here? Again, we've got the reprinted endless spell rules. We have, for narrative and smaller play games, we've got Skirmish at the Realm's Edge and Path to Glory rules as well. Both of those look really cool. Then there's 3 other things. There's Spells of the Realm. This is a return to the magic laws, which we all knew and loved under Warhammer Fantasy. So individual spell laws of 7 to 8 spells for each of the various winds of magic tied to the realms. There is also in the Malign Sorcery book the artifacts of the realms. So these are unique items, 84 unique items available for selection when building your army, and I'll get to show you how those get incorporated later. There's also 2 new pitched battle plans. Finally, the last book that you will need, and definitely will need as a match play gamer, is the General's Handbook 2018, the yearly edition covering match play. So in there we expect to see some tweaks, potentially some rules of 1. That's where we also get the reprinted War Scroll changes. So we know that there's changes coming for Gaunt Summoners, for Pink Horrors, the Great Grey Shaman, Mutalith, Vortex Beasts, Alariel the Everqueen and various others. There's 6 new match play battle plans. They've completely reprinted the summoning rules to introduce the new summoning mechanics now that reinforcement points are dead. And they've also got 6 reprinted and tweaked General's Handbook 2017 match play rules, match play battle plans, sorry. Also, the other thing to note is to expect that there will be a free PDF errata released online on the day of the release on the 30th. So there's already been a few of us feeding in particular questions, comments, etc., which we hear are going to be addressed in the errata on the day 1 release. But thankfully, very small set of those. I put sort of 1 or 2 questions that were in my head. So fundamentally, the question is, what do you need? What do you need as a match play gamer? And I think the answer is probably all 3 of those sources. Now, the reason I was tempted to say that you strictly don't need Malign Sorcery. You'd be able to proxy the models if you wanted to build them or custom convert them for your army, as long as you've got the right base size and things like that. And that's with a big assumption that the War Scroll cards are going to be available on the app, which I assume they will be. I could be tempted to say that you could do away with it if money was tight. But there's one reason why I don't think you can, and that's because of the artifacts of the realm rules, which I'll go in and explain later. So for me, I can see what Games Workshop were doing. They've tried to cover off everything that you need to know and the different layers of match play in the 3 different books. There's naturally book size constraints, there's printing constraints, there's a whole range of things which go into the restraints on what can physically go into these books. For me, it was a little bit of a disappointment because I would like to have seen more into one, because you're going to be carrying a lot with you. Now, you might be able to get all this stuff online in terms of through the Games Workshop site and getting digital versions and to reduce the paper load. But you are going to have a bit of paper, especially once you put a battle tome on top if you're running a battle tome army. So my suggestion, take your core rules, do your cheat sheet, know your rules before your tournament, reduce the paper load. So that's the sort of all I wanted to touch on there, but the books themselves, really good read, very impressive. Now, what I want to touch on are the realms. Realm rules have caused a lot of interest around the place. So the realm of battle rules, as always, are optional. So the core rules say that you pick a realm in which your battle is going to be played during that game. So the way that the rules are written is that the players can decide to put it in one realm. If the players can't decide, then there's a roll-off and the winner picks. Now, this is all framed within this is optional if the players want to use it. I can see events taking different approaches. Some events will include them, some events won't. So that's the realm of battle rules. Now, that's setting the realm at the beginning of the game. Now, what do you get in terms of what is a realm of battle rule? They are realm sphere magic. Now, this is separate from the Malign Sorcery rules. Realm sphere magic is one spell that is known by every single wizard in your army if they are fighting a battle in that realm. Now, there's also realm commands. These are an additional command ability that can be used and accessed by heroes fighting in that realm, and they're also realmscape features. So the person who chose the realm can roll a d6 and you get a random effect, sort of terrain rules across the entire battle. Now, what do we see in terms of realm rules for Malign Sorcery? There's 2 things. There's realm artifacts, which I mentioned, and there's the spell laws. Now, the spell laws are tied to the realm. So it's only if you're using or choosing to use the realm of battle rules that you will also use the spell laws or can use the spell laws. If you do use the spell laws, each wizard in your army knows all of the spells from that spell law. So you learn 7 to 8 spell laws. So much more variety and choice there. In terms of realm artifacts aren't part of the sort of optional realm of battle rules, and instead are part of list selection in terms of when you write your list, you can choose a realm for your army to be from. And then what happens is you can choose that when writing your army list and you are selecting your artifacts, you can substitute one of the existing artifacts that you would be entitled to for one of the other ones that are available in that realm that you have chosen. So it's a swap. Now, one of the restrictions on that is that it's an artifact that you would be if you were able to select an artifact normally. So people like allied heroes, if you've got a hero in your allied allowance, they aren't normally able to select allegiance abilities. So they can't select artifacts. So at least on my reading, might be clarified later, they can't have a separate realm artifact. It's not a sneaky way to get extra artifacts into your army. So that's really what we have got in terms of what the realm rules are, how they work. So moving quickly on to core rules, we've got a question of what's inside those core rules in the 18 pages. You've got everything rolled into one now. We used to have things for War Scroll battalions and allegiance abilities and deployment and various other things scattered in battle tomes or how to play guides and other such things, all been pulled together now. So we have rules for rounds, attacking, wizards, triumphs, terrain, rules about battle plans, war scroll rules, realm of battle rules, and allegiance abilities, all tied into the core rules, all so that you've got them. One of the cool things to see is that the rules of one have been all folded in. So you don't have separate rules of one in terms of magic casting, etc. All come into the core rules now. A couple of other things to note in there. 6 inches vertical coherency has been added in terms of where your models are in relation to each other. This is important because of changes to coherency, which I'll touch on later. And there's a change to cover. So no longer will monsters or war machines with a wounds characteristic greater than 8 gain cover. So, whistle-stop tour through the rules. Let's move on to list writing. So in terms of list writing, the pitch battle chart is the same. So the number of heroes, behemoths, battle line units, allies, allowances, etc. are the same. Everything gets written on your list in terms of weapon selection, artifacts, spells. One of the things for match play is that you don't replace your general if it dies. This is something that's in the core rules and in open play and narrative play, that if your general dies, you can select another and generate another command trait. You can't do that in match play. If your general dies, you're gone. Very good to hear for countering armies which have a command trait which just runs through the entire force. Battalions. Battalion drops happen the same way. So they set up some or all of them, the battalion at the same time. Now, this wording is clearer than before, but there's no restriction on how you drop, which was one of the things that used to be in the FAQ. So presumably, subject to the provisos of GHB and erratas coming out, you could drop 1 unit, 1 unit, 1 unit, 1 unit, and then the remainder of the battalion in one go in order to ensure that you get choice of first turn. There has been no change to the priority, to who decides who goes first. If you finish deploying first, you get a choice of go first. No change there at all. As I was saying, artifacts, rule of 1 is built in. In terms of allies, the core rules say 1 in 4 units can be allies. The pitch battle rules make it clear that it's 25%, so nothing has changed there. Allies can't be your general. They cannot use or benefit from allegiance abilities. That was the same. Reinforcement points can be your ally, or reinforcements, reserves can be allies. So what else? One of the things that's interesting there is mixed faction battalions. So the units count as allies, it would seem at least. On the core rules, have a look at the War Scroll Battalions page. You'll see at the bottom about allies. It says you can have allies in your War Scroll Battalion. Now, we don't normally have a mechanic for that, so to me that can only refer to the sort of mixed faction battalions. So what that means is that if that's correct, the units that you include in your mixed faction battalion, which might be battle line, say Liberators in a Shadowhammer compact, won't count as battle line units for the purposes of setting your army, because allied units don't count for battlefield roles. Now, I'm not sure that that's what's intended, so we might see an errata or we might see something in the General's Handbook, but at least on the first reading, that's something that stood out to me. Moving on to the hero phase. The command abilities can be used by allies. So whilst an allied hero can't benefit from allegiance abilities, they can use any command ability that they've got on their war scroll, as long as you've got the points available to do it. Quickly touching on magic, covered everywhere else. Unbinding and dispelling is going to be really big things in this edition, which is great to see, because pretty much no one dispelled or had a chance to unbind up to this point, unless you had a character who had a super long range. Now you've got unbinding at 30 inches, you're going to have much more choice. And I think with the greater range of spells and endless spells, there's going to be much more of a dynamic about, oh, do I try and unbind this spell? Do I wait? Do I know that Purple Sun is coming? Or Jaws, or some of these cool endless spells? Am I going to hold my unbinds to make sure that I try and unbind those spells, rather than an arcane bolt or something that is getting thrown around at the start of the turn? So moving on to endless spells. So I've been asked a range of questions about endless spells, how they're paid for. So you pay for them, there's a set of rules, they go from 20 to 100 points. Most of them are in the 20 to 60 point range. If you pay for them and put them on your army list, all wizards in your army know the spell. So you don't have to assign it to a particular wizard, all your wizards know it. Now, In match play, you can't have two of the same endless spell on the battlefield at the same time cast by your army. So if I cast Purple Sun and my opponent casts Purple Sun, that's fine, but I can't cast two Purple Suns with my army. Now, I can have two different endless spells. So I could have a Purple Sun and an Umbral Spell Portal, for instance, or you might try another combination. But you can have two endless spells at once. Now, how are they cast and unbound? Just like any other spell, there's a casting roll. You roll 2d6 to meet it. Now, you can only cast one endless spell per wizard per turn. It just takes too much energy for them to cast it. So if you've got Nagash, you're not going to be casting 4 endless spells. Or any other supercaster, you can only do one. So other restrictions on the casting, if you can't set it up, it doesn't work. So if you're swamped around in a horde of units, you're not going to be able to place the spell down, you can't cast it. The spell itself also can't be affected by any abilities, buffs, etc. Sort of covered how much you can have on the table on any one time. How is it dispelled? Now, dispelling is a new term brought in for if you don't unbind it. If you let the spell go off or you're unsuccessful in binding the models on the table and moving around, then you've got a chance to dispel it in later turns. So what you would then do when it comes to your magic phase is you decide, right, with this wizard, I'm not going to cast one of the usual spells that wizard can cast. Instead, I'm going to try and dispel the endless spell. Roll 2d6. If you beat the casting value for that endless spell, then it disappears. You sort it. Now, you're not going to have, at least from what we can see from the rules so far, you're not going to have modifiers on that. So some of the large, difficult to cast endless spells, like Purple Sun, might be hard to dispel in later turns. So that's another thing which goes into your unbinding choice. Do I unbind it now, when I might be able to get buffs, or is it going to be better left for dispelling? So if it's not dispelled, how is an endless spell removed from the table? Well, it is dispelled, we've covered that. It also gets lost if it crosses a battlefield edge, so if it wanders off, if it's a predatory spell, wanders off the edge of the table, or you can voluntarily remove it using a method available on the War Scroll. Now, there's different rules in the different endless spells. Some of them you can't, at least from what I can see. I could be wrong on that. The other thing is that once they're on the table, before moving on to movement, how do you recast them? If it has been dispelled or it wanders off the table edge, you can recast it. You don't have to pay the points again. If you voluntarily remove it and recast it, you don't have to pay the points again. So it's just one cost for no matter how many times you bring it back to the table. In terms of movement, they move at the start of the battle round before anything happens. The way that it happens is that the player who is going second in that battle round gets to move one of the spells first. Then it alternates, it goes to the other player who then gets to move the other spell or any other of the endless spells, and it just alternates between you. So that's part of the dynamic which has gone into altering the priority roll and double turn mechanic. Now, just high-level comment, there's some really interesting stuff there in Endless Sorcery. There's lots of options. They're really going to fill a gap in terms of list building at the end when you've got some points left over, or to build around. There's some real options in there, especially some options around bravery debuffs. Bravery debuff was kind of a thing which we talked about in first edition, but didn't see many competitive lists running. Now I think we'll see much more. So, what kind of endless spells do I like? The pendulum spell looks particularly good. Question though about that is that it's only got a 7-inch move, and you've got to make sure that you can place it clear of any models if you want to clip over enemy units to do the mortal wounds. Geminids look particularly good. High move, mortal wound radius, they look like a good spell, quite easy to cast. Burning Head and Jaws look like reliable kind of damage dealers as well. So how do you counter endless spells? As well as having things with automatic unbinds like spell weavers or having strong magic defense, then think about how you protect your units. Bubble wrapping, I think we'll see much more of around heroes. It does two things. One, it will protect you with the Lookout Sir rule from shooting. Two, it will also protect you from endless spells, because they won't be able to run over your hero and land still, hopefully at least. So that's one way of protecting. Two other things to talk about in terms of attacking. Now moving on to attacking. is now with the rules on shooting, chaff, so moving high mobile units within 3 inches of an enemy shooting unit so they can only shoot at that throwaway unit is going to be a viable tactic again. Really, really useful. Useful for small units with alternate deployment rules. Also, there's a slight change with multiple weapons as well. So if you've got multiple weapons on your attack profile, previously it was that they all happened simultaneously, but you rolled them separately. Now, at least from the core rules, it looks like you get, as controlling player, get to choose the order that the attacks happen in. So you could choose, and they don't happen simultaneously. So if you've got a weapon that's got a particular benefit for your later attacks, removing rend or something like that, then go with that one first, and then your other attacks. That's a small change, which I hope I'm not reading too much into it, but it looks like an interesting one. Combat phase. I'm not going to touch on the pile-in rules. So pile-in has changed, basically making more freedom for large units and hordes so that they're not being tagged around. So even if they're in base contact with a smaller model, they can rotate around to get in contact with something else. The only way that you're going to stop them doing that now is if you pin them from both sides. So if you're thinking about pinning an enemy model, pin it from both sides with two models. One of the other things, the pick and pass mechanic. So this is something new. This is something where the wording seems to have come across from Shadespire, for instance. So in the combat phase, you either pick a unit to attack or you pass. Now, you can't pass if there's any eligible units available to attack. So that means any unit in combat which has not previously attacked. So that's the no choosing not to attack rule. But the way the combat phase runs is that it ends once both people pass. Now, this is cleaner. It shows when the combat phase ends, but it also adds a bit of design space for abilities which could be triggered or used after players have passed. So this is something that I am informed happens in Shadespire. So I don't know whether we'll see that or whether this is just a cleaner way of tidying the wording. We will see. Final thing I want to comment on is Battle Shock. So in Battle Shock, you've got now an increased effect. You've got two things. One, the new command ability for Inspiring Presence is triggered in the Battle Shock phase. So you need to make sure you've got command points able to spend, especially if you are in the first turn and you're going second. Another reason to take a battalion is to have a point that you can spend and use in that Battle Shock phase. Also means that because Inspiring Presence only works in the Battle Shock phase, it's no use against bravery debuffs or bravery tests in other phases. One of the other things to note is the coherency rules. So if you are out of coherency at the end of the Battle Shock phase, so say you've got a long line of models, and for tactical reasons, you're just taking models out in terms of casualty removal along the line, leaving big gaps. But you don't care because you've got no intention of moving the unit. It's a big chaff line, happy for it to just stay and never move. That was a sort of broken mechanic that you could do. You'd have sort of long lines tying up the board. Now you can't do that. So if a unit is out of coherence at the end of the Battle Shock phase, then say you've got a long unit, you've got 20 here, you've got 19 here, and a gap. Well, you've got to choose either to lose the entire 20 or the entire 19. So there's going to be a major effect. So you'll see it in big units snaking. You'll also see it in smaller elite multi-wound high-cost units. Because if you're not being careful with how you're allocating wounds, especially the rule about how once you start allocating to a model, you have to keep allocating to that model. So you might have suffered a wound from shooting, charged into combat. Be careful where you put that model, because that's the one that you're going to remove first, and you might not get an opportunity to pile in again and refill the gap before you end up losing additional models at the end of the Battle Shock phase. So that is a very, very whistle-stop tour through the match play rules as we currently know them for Warhammer Age of Sigmar 2nd edition. So all I can say is thank you very much for listening. I'm going to put all the show notes up on aosshorts.com. There's everything that you need to know about the new edition there. There's all the new rules, there's all the new coverage, all the new shiny. There's new lore, there's narrative, there's hobby tips, There's all the resources. There's everything, hopefully, everything that you need for Warhammer Age of Sigmar on the site. As I said, I'm filming this from Vagabond in Auckland, New Zealand. For any New Zealand players watching, highly worth checking them out. They've got both an online store at vagabond.co.nz and livewildgames.co.nz.